guys, and welcome back to Gabe Miller Music. Today I am finally checking out the MPC One. This is by far the most requested device on this channel, and I spent a solid week with it, trying to get to know it, learning the interface. It was a little bit intimidating, to be completely honest, and making some beats with it. So I'm going to show you the unboxing, some of my process for learning it, and then run through a few beats and some of my absolute favorite features that I've discovered so far. And be aware that I've barely scratched the surface, and we'll do a whole lot more with this in the future, because I bought this one, and I was able to do that with the help of today's sponsor, Distrokid, and they've got a ton of new stuff to help you get your music out there, but more on that later. Right now, let's jump into the MPC One. Guide thing, nice to have. I'll definitely be checking this. Cables in here. Ooh, this thing's heavy. Feels super solid. You got vents on the side. Like, this thing's a friggin' laptop, much like the Machine Plus. Clicky buttons. Here is a super quick look at the I/O. USB 2.0, pretty standard for stuff like this. And of course, power brick. Then this is the other half of the power adapter right here. Let's boot it up. Ooh. Pretty. Here we go. This is the interface. All right, so I've got this connected up, just stereo outs out of here, headphones in here. This will probably be a little bit different from some of my other first day with device videos. Usually I've been able to go in pretty much blind. The stuff I've tried for the first day videos before has been different iterations of stuff that's at least somewhat familiar to me, like Novation and Roland stuff. This is another story, so I'll be referring to the manual quite a bit. But first of all, let's mess around just a little bit. We got a touchscreen here, velocity sensitive pads. So machine users will be fairly familiar with some of this stuff. This is just one of the default presets, by the way. There should be quite a bit that we can do to adjust individual sounds as well. So let me jump into here. Okay, so we've got sequences. I'm going to leave that alone for now. We've got different banks as well. These pads aren't lit up because there's nothing in them. Oh, that's interesting too. They've got these color-coded based on the kind of sound. So these are both kicks, snares, hi-hats, and cymbals, sample chops, and it looks like these are actually in a mute group together already. What I really want to try to do is mess with the kit itself. I should be able to just, yeah, you can scroll through. I do like that they gave us more kind of knob controls of stuff, so we don't have to rely on the touchscreen if we don't want to. This feels quite fluid to work with. So this looks like where we pull up sounds. The splice integration is something I'm very excited to try. Load. The sample exists. Replace it. Okay, so now that's living in there. And as far as I know, this isn't like Machine in that you can jump in to an individual sound and have it function as its own virtual instrument. Oh, we've got a screen protector. Can we peel this? So there's a different sample assign window. Okay, that's nice to have. I don't really know why you wouldn't select it like this, but this helps confirm that that works. So you've got options for how you want to deal with the interface. What I want to do right now is just start a blank project. Let's start this guy off by just being a drum sampler. This looks like entire kits, samples. So we've got a ton of kits in here by default. I will almost certainly load in a ton of my own stuff. Let's just try to load that in. There we go. So now I want to select that one. Some kind of snare in there. Okay, so that's fairly straightforward. There is a search right here. That's one of the big advantages of having a touchscreen, is that I can just filter this quite easily. And of course, for a proper song, I would like max out all the pads that I possibly can. Right now I want to get out of browse and start tweaking these sounds, and then load up another track, I think is what we're doing here. The main thing I want to do is turn this down by quite a bit if I can. Pad mixer. Here we go. This is going to take some getting used to. What's really nice though is that we've got insert stuff for every individual pad, which is kind of astonishing, really. Kind of want to do something that's like really obvious. Just like this. So that's not quite what I want in life. Let's see what these Q links do. So these are these major effects. That's nice that you can see that. That doesn't sound great, but mainly I just wanted to try to figure out how this works. I'm actually not sure where a distortion would be living. There's all sorts of stuff in here. Let's just go something super basic for now. So yeah, we want to turn down... Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so that goes through presets. I can select this different window and control what the cue links control. Control the mix. So I'm going to drive that harder. So you've got a lot of control. Okay, up next, I just want to try and record something. So I tapped out a tempo, and having a click might be kind of nice. Let me figure that out next. Okay, so it does not detect how many bars you want it to be. You've got to actually set that on purpose. Okay, so that's a mess. I just wanted to try to figure out how to do it. We can probably try to clean this up, actually. Okay, so that just grabbed everything and scooted it over. That is absolutely not what I want. Okay, so you can select stuff that way. That's a little more hands-on. Look at that. Okay, so here's what I figured out. You've got these settings here. See, these always control navigation. You've got this stuff up here. It's probably hard to see, but this selects notes. This adds notes. This erases them. That's fairly straightforward. What I can do from here is select a note, select nudge, and then I can scoot it back and forth. In this case, I've got don't snap turned on. So this snaps it to the grid. It actually looks like this did auto quantize it. Not exactly what I want in life. Oh God, what have I done? So let me just try to add a kick here. Differentiate the section a little bit. That will do for now. I'm not necessarily trying to make a banger here. I'm just trying to get the hang of this thing. The learning curve is interesting, to say the least. Like, I'm really glued to the manual here. I almost certainly will get used to it, but like, this thing's basically a laptop. That's just going to take some getting used to. So I would like to start a new track. By the way, this turns quantization on and off. It was probably on by default, so that's something I want to double check. So I've created a new track just using this button here, and I want to select the type of it, and then I can go in and start to edit it. All right, so this is, you can't really see that, but this is a plugin. This is a key group program. A key group program accepts samples. You do not go to browse to load a sample when you want your stuff to be chromatic. Instead, you go to that main kind of homepage thing, program edit, and now you've got access to all of your layers. So we've got a bunch of parameters that we can control about each sample, including effects. Is that a bit much? That'll do. I want to get another sample in here. You have up to 4 layers, it looks like, which is really neat. I also want to change how this behaves. Get that polyphony all the way down to mono. Nice, we got one shot in here. You know what I do want to try? Let's go back to effects real quick, because I would love to go into dynamics and add the very funny mother ducker. This little snapback. And, oh, it likes buses now, does it? Because I just need to send the kick to that then. We'll come back to that, I guess. I wanted to add another layer if I can. Give me layer 2. Select a sample. So that's in there. Are the effects separate? Okay, so those effects are global. Maybe send that up an octave, if this is indeed. There we go. Oh, and we got filtering stuff. This is what's really cool to me, is that these samples can not only function as samples, but also as oscillators, essentially. So if you've got filter envelopes. Okay, so that's interesting. That's coming before the distortion. We've also even got LFO stuff in here. I'm not going to bother with that right now. We can come back to that later. So yeah, this is the complicated version. I love how visual that is. Okay, also, I'm an idiot. I just noticed we've got a dedicated program edit button, as well as sample edit sampler here hands-on. You do not have to menu dive for it. I'm just going to record some garbage and go from there. Yeah, it definitely didn't quantize it. I kind of want to figure out the ducking here. I want to send just this one to a bus. Okay, literally, buses are not mentioned anywhere in the manual. So I'm going to have to just figure this out by sheer force of will. Okay, so I wasted a bunch of time messing with routing and all this kind of stuff. That's not how that works. Let me do this properly. Program edit. We're on our kick. So let's go to effects. We're going to add under the dynamics. It is this as an input, I believe, to bus 1. There we go. Switch to my other track. Program edit. I'm getting faster. Tell this to accept it from bus 1. Let me just hit play and hear how that sounds. I can dial that in. I love the little bouncing duck animation. That works. So 3, unused. This is interesting. You've basically got to add stuff to your sample bank, and then you load those samples in. I suppose that makes sense to try to keep this stuff fairly separate. So that's not mapped to the pads yet. That is now in my sample bank. So now what I can do, program edit, choose sample, and that will now be an option. There it is. I want you to have a big ol' reverb, or a big ol' delay actually. That's obviously a bit loud. So I want to be in track mix for that probably. Just control the level. I'm shamelessly stealing this melody from something else I made a while ago. I just want to record something just to get something in here. Okay, it is quite a bit later. I spent some time off camera trying to get more fluid with the workflow and trying to mess around with some plugins. So here's what I've got so far of this beat, because I've overhauled it a bit. Still not amazing, but hopefully you get the idea. I think I have my head around at least the basics of how this is supposed to work for a more optimal workflow. So you don't want to over-rely on the screen is the big thing I've taken away from messing around with this some more. These buttons will switch you between the windows that you want, much like on a circuit or a Roland device, or pretty much any other groove box for that matter. It's just laid out kind of weird, and so it's not obvious. But for instance, to get to that menu that takes you to a bunch of stuff, you just click this. To get to that main window, you use this window here. This is actually super useful because this allows you to quickly switch between different plugins and tracks, browse, track mix, and then there's stuff hidden behind shift commands, like your pad mix and your MIDI editing. That's all a button press away, and then there's stuff like sample edit, program edit. So if you're editing a plugin, you just press this to get directly there. Once again, that's probably fairly obvious if I had actually read the manual all the way through, but there's only so much I can learn by just staring at a manual. I have to use something hands-on to really get the hang of it, and if I have to struggle a bit in that process, so be it. All that being said, let me go to a different track. So this is track 2. I've replaced my bass with a plugin. So yeah, shift notes takes you to all the notes. In this case, I've got this tuned to the key that I want, and I've got a scale set up. That's super straightforward. You've got a bunch of options in here. And this is using the bass synth with just like a mildly modified preset, and then the ducker applied on top of that. I believe that's on the track mix, so let me go to that. Plugin 02. Yeah, that gets the ducker. Also, we've got this other track using a different plugin. So this is an electric piano virtual instrument. The only thing I did to it to modify the actual sound was add that ping-ponging delay. And then also, once again, apply a bit of ducking. So that fills out the beat quite a bit. That's really working for me. And we still got a bunch more tracks. I'm probably not going to fill them all up today. I really want to just get a general idea of how to properly use this thing. And I'm getting there. This is an incredibly deep device and instrument and DAW in a box with a ton of stuff. Not all of it's obvious. And that's going to take some time for me to really properly get my head around and master. Honestly, that's kind of what you want, especially if, like me, you've been in the groovebox game for a while and want something with more power and more depth. This is definitely not going to replace any of the other stuff I have. I've got a very soft spot for the budget stuff, but I do want to commit to trying to get a bunch out of this thing because there's a lot it has to offer if you have some patience. So as overall first impressions, like obviously the build is incredibly solid. There's an incredible amount of power packed into here. I'm not sure I'm crazy about the built-in virtual instruments so far. The electric piano sounds quite nice, but some of the other virtual instruments are kind of limited, but that's not why I bought this. I bought this for the sample capabilities, and I'll be able to layer samples enough to build some reasonably complex instruments anyway. So that's fine. That's not a big deal to me. They're still nice to have. The plug-in instruments are still nice to have, but I don't know if I will rely on them a ton. Not like I would on a circuit or a Roland device anyway. The way that plugins and tracks interact is a little bit odd because like plugin programs can technically be assigned to multiple tracks. There's some stuff where things are interconnected in kind of a weird way, and that's just going to take some time to get used to. At this point, I'll play a couple of better beats that I've made on the MPC One since, and walk you through the beat that you heard in the intro and what it can show us about some of the MPC's features. But first, let's talk about today's sponsor, Distrokid. Distrokid has been continually improving their service and recently added this goodies tab full of stuff to help you get your music out there and present it more professionally. For instance, you can submit your music to some selected playlists, promote yourself using mini videos such as this one, warning, flashing lights. Or if you want something longer than social media promo material and want to actually post something to YouTube, you can pay a bit extra to generate a whole visualizer video. And they've given you a ton of tools to access different profiles for different platforms and to get lyrics and credits embedded into your song for search engines and all the streaming services. You also have access to backups of your music files and a way to solve certain conflicts. For instance, if you share a name with another artist and their music keeps appearing on your profile or vice versa, and a way to make sure that any YouTube video that you've given permission to use your music doesn't get copyright claimed. If you'd like to check out Distrokid and get 7% off your first year of membership, be sure to hit up my link in the description. That helps out the channel and gets you a fantastic service. So thank you so much if you choose to do that. But with all that being said, let's jump back into the MPC. I've got a couple of beats I want to show you. Both of them are fairly simple and don't even come close to maxing out the track count on this thing, but both of them do test out a few key capabilities of this thing that I really wanted to dive into. So here's the first one. So the first thing I wanted to test with this beat is the Splice Sounds integration, which this does have for those of you unfamiliar. You can connect the MPC One with an Ethernet cable, and then it'll just download your entire Splice library, either to the internal drive or the SD card, which I definitely recommend. And from there, you can search around and start adding them to your session. So if I want to go to packs, I've got a ton of stuff in here. And I can start to choose sounds. I can also browse by like different types and such. And if I want to add a sound, say this hi-hat, I just hit load. And then I can start to assign these samples. So I've got a clear spot here. Try to find that hat. Some of this organization is a little janky, but now that's there. You've got quite a bit that you can do just with this grid of pads. These all do function as one-shots, but if I go into Program Edit, there's not a ton I've done to most of these, but like this is a loop that I've just chopped into a little one-shot. And then this kick has been sent to the ducker so that it can duck the bass. And you can even load entire loops into this thing and time stretch them to be within the time of your project, which I've done with a little background percussion loop. Moving on to the next track, this is the bass. This is also a sample, and in fact, both of the synth tracks are samples using key group programs. So those will take a sample, map it to a keyboard, and then you can play it chromatically or to specific scales that you go and set. And in the case of this bass synth, I actually do have a good amount of processing. For one thing, I just made sure it's mono. I have it set to just ring out as long as it feels like it. That way it'll never cut off before I want it to. And then let me get rid of these effects. It's a nice little Reese bass. Added, of course. And then the big thing is the distortion. And then, of course, the ducker, which, as you may have noticed, turned it up in volume a bit. That's ducking it to the kick. The other synth track is fairly similar in that it's a sample mapped to the keyboard with a ton of processing on it. So let me get rid of all this. Also, I should mention, I've got this pitched up probably more than it should be, and I'm kind of doing that on purpose. This is more or less where the sample wants to live, and this is where I pushed it to. That sounds kind of janky, but then with the effects, lo-fi, reverb, and delay, now it's something completely different. So this beat was kind of a test run for making a dark, moody beat, for working with the splice integration, and for taking samples and turning them into synths that are pretty unrecognizable from the original samples. I can take that even farther by layering sounds on top of each other and combining them into one instrument, which is what I did in the next beat. This is probably a bit much, but this takes some of the aspects of the first beat and takes them a whole lot farther. Let's start off with the drums. Pretty simple. I think I ended up going with this clap right here. So this kick has a transient shaper on it. I toyed with the idea of adding a distortion as well, but I think I ended up not using that. There's just a tiny bit of EQ to bring out some extra high end. That's it in terms of drum processing. And this is like a bass house, slap house thing, so the drums are going to be fairly simple anyway. The main hero here is the bass. This is a lot of fun. This is 3 separate samples layered on top of each other. Let me turn off the effects, which are pretty minimal. This is the one doing most of the heavy lifting. A kind of future house type bass. Layered on top of that is this kind of slap bass thing. The attack of the first bass and the body of the second bass complement each other super well. And then this one is adding kind of a more round tone. Some more low mids, bit of a longer attack, that kind of stuff. So altogether, they complement each other really well, and then we add the processing, which is basically just a ducker and a reverb, and we've got an entirely new sound to work with here. And then of course we've got the harsh ducking with the kick, and you may also notice I've gone pretty hard on the swing here. And then finally, we've got this little synth part. This one's a lot of fun, and I did not have to do much to get it to sound the way that it does. It's just a really nice brass sound. That sounds pretty good kind of wherever you put it. And I used it as a little lead in this case. And if I go to track mix, I've got some extra processing on it here. Let me turn that stuff off. So standard reverb and delay really brought it to life, and then I've ducked it a bit to the kick as well. If I wanted to take this even farther, I'd probably add another drum track with just a bunch of sound effects, some extra bass one-shots, maybe even a couple of chants or vocal samples or something like that. And then from there, I just use my other tracks to build this into a full song with builds, a breakdown of some sort, and I might actually do that in the future if I can get around to it. That's my first week or so with the MPC One. So far, I'm quite impressed. I've been able to get pretty fast with at least its kind of basic workflow, and I can see there is an immense amount of power that I still haven't even tapped into yet, which I definitely intend to in the coming months. So to those of you who suggested I try it out, thank you so much for suggesting it. Thank you so much to Distrokid for sponsoring this video, and thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to see some other videos documenting my first experiences with some other music production devices, you can click or tap up over here somewhere. Be sure to hit up that Distrokid link in the description, and I'll be back with a new video in a little bit. Peace. I'm so good at this.